All right, Wednesday, October 18th, 2023. This is ALI-M.O.N.Y, Ali, Mayor of New York, ALI-M.O.N.Y. Nothing to do with alimony. But a podcast, I don't know, whatever you call it, about what if I ran for the office of Mayor of New York City, or what if somehow I was placed in that position, or really hear some ideas for it. Again, I don't necessarily want to be mayor or a politician, although it's something that's come up before. I'm of a certain age now where it's a matter of I have a few chapters left, if I'm lucky, but really none of us know when the 2-minute warning bell has rung, and tomorrow is promised to nobody. So these are some thoughts I had based on an idea I had about running for the office of mayor, based on the suggestion of people who had met me and said, you should run for mayor. And it's not as though I don't have ideas. Again, I'm a small-time actor, small-time comedian. I do some voiceover work. And I have the privilege of having the equipment in our office at the theater on 29 between 6 and 7 to discuss my ideas and thoughts for how do we make this the best city it can be and pull out the promise and potential within this city. And again, I walk to work, I take the train, I take the bus, and walking to work today, I saw a few people who were, one for certain was severely mentally ill and aggressive. And it's tough because what do you do? What do you do with someone who is obviously angry, mentally ill, and I saw him walking behind an Asian woman, and I just saw her like, uh-oh. And I was close enough where I said, something might happen. I don't know. He eventually crossed the street after he was somewhat menacing her, and essentially walking around menacing. And as I've said, I believe that all Asian, hate or animosity is mental illness. Doesn't make it right, but at least it helps me go, look, this is mental illness. And most racism is mental illness, although I believe that anti-Semitism is jealousy for the most part. I think Thomas Sowell said that as well when someone asked him, what can we do as Jewish people to be more liked? And he said, you need to fail more, which is interesting. But again, right now, I think we have to try to see ourselves and each other as human beings first. And an alien invasion would immediately unite us as human beings. Or some type of animals rising up against us, Planet of the Apes type situation would again unify us as human beings. But right now, we don't have an enemy that has a face, although we have been invaded by aliens, I believe, to some degree. The virus, an invisible virus, was an alien that invaded us. How it happened, how it infiltrated society, but it was an alien invasion. AI could also eventually be an alien invasion. And we hope the AI that comes is a benevolent AI, but we don't know. We don't know once AI reaches singularity or consciousness what it will decide is best for all humans. It varies. As I've said, anything that's not about global warming is kind of a distraction because that's the real threat, I believe, to all of us. And on any given day, you may not think there's any global warming. Today is a beautiful October day in New York City. Sun is shining. It's cool and brisk. It's sweater weather or wearing a jacket weather. But it's a beautiful day. So on a day like today, there's no sense of global warming in New York City. But I have in the past year in New York City felt levels of heat that I've not felt before. I've felt smog and fog and haze coming from the forest fires of Canada that I'd never felt before. I mean, literally the smell of burning wood on the streets of New York and a haze that I could not believe. And I have experienced weather events like storms, rain, and flooding. So it's here. It's just not here every day. I think it's similar to the way people have a cognitive dissonance around smoking. Smoking is the suicide installment plan. Smoking will eventually kill you. But the reason people do not believe that is because one cigarette never killed anybody. And it's hard to put together in your mind the idea that the culmination of years of smoking does take its toll, but you're pulling that smoke into your mouth, through your lungs, and your lungs are filtering all of that. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed, but I think that things that I'd like to kind of discuss today a little bit are about how do we put our resources towards education and educating the children of the city and making sure the children of the city have a childhood, and the childhood is safe, and the childhood is filled with imaginary play and physical play and playgrounds and reading and writing and arithmetic, and giving them the tools they need to succeed later on in life. Because ultimately, they are the future of New York City. They are the future of society. I'm personally probably in the autumn of my life. But again, who knows when the moment comes where I graduate immediately from Earth School. That could happen at any moment. You know, I've already had many friends pass, some suddenly. So we don't know where each of us is in life. And the world is as precarious as it's ever been because the world is at war. We are in the midst of world wars, wars between nations around the world, and skirmishes. The focus should be on education. So one of the things I believe should happen is the voting age in New York City should be lowered. I think 16 years old at a minimum is an age where people are of sound mind, and they should have a say in who is the mayor of New York and who are the other offices of New York. Now, could you go lower than that? Yes, I believe you could go lower. But if I go much lower than that, much lower than 16, right now it's at 18. If I go to 14 or 12, people will mock and troll. But I believe there is a future that, you know, if you get the right people on the Supreme Court, the right people running for office, the voting age, I don't know, 12, 13. But 16, I do not believe is an age where it sounds so outlandish that it's so different from 18 that a 16-year-old shouldn't be given the opportunity to vote and have a say in who their leaders are. Because the mayor of New York City is a leader. It's a communicator. It's a consoler. It's a therapist for the city. It's a connector for the city. It's a catalyst. It's someone to unite all of us. To not unite not only the police department, but the people who protest against the police department. You know, to find that common ground for all of us. And I think it behooves us, and I know this is hard for some folks, because again, I've had great exchanges with NYPD. I mean, potentially it's because of, I don't know, my age, my size, my demeanor with them, but I'm always happy to say thank you for your service. I know there are probably people in the city who it's hard to say thank you for your service because they may have had altercations, they may have had family members, and something might have happened. And I don't think the NYPD is different than any other entity in the world in the sense that 20% of the people cause 80% of the problems. And even in the NYPD, you'd want to get it down to 10% of the people cause 90% of the problems. But I think it behooves us to thank people. I try to thank bus drivers, especially if they're driving on a Saturday or Sunday. I'll just simply say thank you for working on a Sunday. Thank you for working on a Saturday. Beyond that, I'll just say thank you. And whether I get an acknowledgement or not, that's immaterial. If I see someone sweeping the streets in any capacity, whether they're doing for a business or they're doing it as part of one of the Doe funds or like a neighborhood group that's hired them to sweep, I'll always say thank you. Thank you, sir. I said it, and mostly people will respond, oh, you're welcome. I had one person say to me, thanking me, what are you thanking me for? I said, I'm thanking you for sweeping like an artist. And I don't know. Again, if someone has a chip on their shoulder or they have something that's happened and something you say may trigger them and it may have nothing to do with you, right? Sometimes lately I've been making, a coffee before I leave, and I'll use an old plastic cup from, a Dunkin' Donuts or someplace else, I got a nice coffee, and I'll make it, and then I'll start walking, and I'll think to myself, I don't want this giant iced coffee. Why did I make it? I made it because I'd rather make it at home than spend the, $4 or $5 to get an iced coffee out. But then as I start walking, I'll think to myself, I'm just going to give this to someone who looks like they can use an iced coffee. And invariably, I'll find someone, and I'll just say to them, would you like this iced coffee? And they'll go, yeah, thank you. It may be the only kindness they've been shown that day. It may be the only time that day they've felt seen. And if they're already on the streets, I don't think they mind sharing an iced coffee with someone who's handing it to them. But I think we have to find ways to re-instill that good manners are the glue of society and civility. And we may disagree with each other vehemently, but I believe we should maintain civility and good manners. And even though we may argue and we may be on opposing sides of viewpoints, I think we have to understand and remember that really we're just pushing our brainwashing against someone else's brainwashing. To be a human being is to be brainwashed. Everybody is brainwashed. We have to accept that. And I think if aliens came down and they took over and they were the ones who said, we're going to help you get it together and hear things we've thought about for you, we don't mind if you say what religion you are or what team you like or what anything about you. You just have to say, I'm brainwashed before saying it. So someone may say, I'm this religion, but they would say, I'm brainwashed this religion. Oh, okay, I was brainwashed this religion. You can still say it, but that word brainwashed, imposed on us by the aliens, leaves room, leaves a space, a bit of understanding to understand that it's arbitrary. That somebody was born one place, and this was the system or religion they were given, and now they believe that is the truth. And I think we have to accept that we are all a product of our societies and how we speak and our accents, where we went to school, who we were raised by, what part of the country we grew up in. And I think if we get back to making New York City a city of civility. Now, I know New York gets a rap about, hey, whoa, what's going on? Out of my way. I'm walking here, honking and whatnot. I don't think that's the way it has to be. When I'm driving in the back of a taxi and the cab driver's honking, I say, look, with all due respect, sir, you don't have to honk. I'm not in a rush. We can travel nice and easy. He goes, yeah, but in New York, we have to drive like this. To which I'll say, there's only one steering wheel. You don't have to say we. If you need to say it, you can say, I have to drive like this. I have to honk my horn. Because when we say we lose a bit of our individual humanity and think that, no, I'm driving like this because we all drive like this. We all have to race around the city. We all have to honk our horns. We all have to let people know immediately when the light turns green and they haven't hit the gas. I mean, that's the amazing part. The light is barely turned green and the guy behind you is honking. If that's not a cry for help, I don't know what is. And I hear the cry because, again, it's a city that costs money, as all cities do, everywhere cost money, and there is no outright ownership of anything. There is no outright home ownership in New York City or the country. In New York City, if you own an apartment, you have to pay maintenance. So even if you pay for that apartment outright, completely, paid in full, every month you're going to have to pay maintenance, which I guess is a form of taxes, but the co-op or the condo puts it all together and you pay them. So if you don't pay that for a year or two, they can take away your home. In towns and such, you pay property tax. So you don't pay that property tax for a year or two, someone can buy that lien on your property tax, then you have to buy it back from them. And the interest rate's probably 18 to 20% interest. I just saw something in the news the other day where Arkansas has this day now, October 17th, where you have to pay your full property tax, personal property taxes, by that day. If you don't, heavy penalties. You have till the spring, until October 17th to pay it. Now, I realize that's how towns survive. They survive off of your property tax, fees, licenses, violations, permits. These are the ways that towns have figured out this is how we have to run the town. Well, which means, the roads, public parks, public schools. But again, it should be noted that the best investment we can make is in public education, is in the education of the young. The education not only in the reading and the reading out loud and writing and arithmetic, multiplication tables, dividing, percentages, rough math, which leads to more fine-tuned math, a sense of history, public speaking, civility, able to take care of yourself. What do they call it? Not presidential, but the ability to kind of, speak, take care of things, executive function. That's what I was thinking of. Basic executive function. Teaching people, the necessity to floss, brush your teeth, scrape your tongue, clean your medicine cabinets, clean your bathroom, doing chores, helping around the house, finding a job of some kind, especially when you're young. And I think, if I had my druthers, I would say in New York City, you need to get a job waiting tables or working in a restaurant before you can get your license. Now, I know there's some politicians right now that are advocating that the voting age be changed to 25, which is absolutely ridiculous. I would go the other way and have the voting age dropped. And they also want to have people take a test in order to get their ability to vote, like the same type of test someone who is an immigrant who wants to get their citizenship has to take. I think that's a slippery slope of having someone take a test to get your voting registration. I think if you're of a certain age, you should be given the right to vote. And I think that age should be moved down to 16. But I do believe that we should help folks know a basic amount about the history of this nation, the history of politics, how politics works, by the numbers. How many people under the mayor, how many council people, how does it all work in each town, how many, and some people know these things. They know how many, that there's a president, a vice president, a speaker of the house. They know there's, 100 senators, 2 from each state. Representatives, I think they're like 435. But breaking it all down for people so they understand that. I think when I was younger, politics was not even something that I even thought about going into. I wasn't drawn to it. I would probably say because I knew I couldn't be president at a very young age. And because of that, I probably shied away from any politics. I rebuffed it. You can hear the horns outside right now. Maybe not. Maybe I can only hear it. And because I'm so close to the mic, the mic is not picking up the horns. But I can say with certainty there is far more horn honking than ever in New York City. I remember after 9/11, I didn't hear a horn for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. It was unbelievable. The day of it, that Tuesday that it happened, there was no horns. You could smell the smoke, and the streets were deserted. And as I walked around, and there was an ominous feel, because even by the end of that day, we knew how many, roughly, people had, you could say died, but murdered, slaughtered, executed. But for 6 to 8 weeks, nobody was honking their horn. Everybody was traveling and walking and driving around the city with a sense of, I don't want to say brotherly love, but humanly love. Because I think we have to find a ways to extricate words that are for all mankind, for all humankind. Congressperson, But on that day, there emanated in the city of New York a collective humanity and civility. And I wished, and I thought to myself, I wonder how long this would last. It lasted a few months until those who were honkers began to honk horns again. And I think that's what it comes down to. Some people are just horn honkers. They saw their parents do it. They feel like they have to do it. They think it's cool. They think that it's anger, and they think it's righteous anger. But all anger is fear. Everything that's not love is fear. So whatever of the 7 deadly sins you take, you can take them down to love or fear. And you hear a siren right now. And if I were to try to do this in some way where I was in a, soundproof room or something, and I had to wait for the perfect opportunity to record these, I come into the office of our little theater, and I have this setup that I'm lucky to have, and I turn on the computer and I turn on the Rode Podcaster, and I'm able to start talking within 5 minutes to convey my thoughts, to be able to practice talking out loud, to try to understand what is it that I want for this city, aside from a very livable city with a high quality of life for everybody. And I don't know, is that mayor of New York? Is that comptroller? Is that czar of quality of life? Is that somebody who's just, I wouldn't say the mascot, but the person who kind of cheers New York on to go, look what we got here. Look at this amazing city. We're all here for some reason, I would believe. I mean, I came here in 1999 to write for Saturday Night Live, and then after 9/11, I decided to stay and make it my home, as opposed to go to Los Angeles and pursue an acting career out there. If I had 1,000 lifetimes, sure, I would have liked a life in Los Angeles to see how far I could have gone if I had really pursued acting out there. And I lived there for a year and change in the 90s, but ultimately, New York is where I feel most at home. Walking around New York, the buildings, the lights, the variety. And there's many places in New York that, although I'm not going out to Wohop in Chinatown to eat Chinese food every night at 3 a.m. anymore, I like to know that it's there. I like to know that if I want to listen to late night jazz, I can go to the Vanguard, even though I haven't been in a while. But it's the knowing, I think. I think that's what people love about New York City. They know, look, if I wanted to, I could go out and listen to music right now. I could go out late and have Chinese food. I could go, I could just take a walk and I could walk around. And I could go to 30 Rock and just walk. I can walk down Fifth Avenue. If you walk in Central Park, you got to be careful. But my hope is that, the challenge is, I believe that the only victims are children, the elderly, and animals, and the rest of us are volunteers. But children are victims, and we have to do what we can to protect children and animals and the elderly. At a certain point, you need help. You need a helping hand. You need to be looked after and protected. The rest of us, to some degree, we're volunteers, although things happen. And right now, the world is at war. And children are dying at the hands of usually one madman who has decided to wage war and gotten other men, usually, to go along for the ride because those men are afraid of losing their jobs and their lives. So instead of standing up and saying, with all due respect, Mr. President, Mr. Premier, whatever they're called in each country, I don't believe we should engage in this war, they go along with it. And now the way the world works, they can have money in other countries, homes in other countries, live lavishly in other countries, have their families live in other countries aside from the country that is engaging in the war when the war is. And I suppose they're doing it for their families as well. But I think if we want this to work, we have to think of everybody's family as our family. And how do we make sure that every family is taken care of? How do we walk in their shoes? How do we take the resources that we've been given? And the big resource really is land. Land is something that really, and to some degree, probably where law came from to some degree, is land. And landlords, landowners needing attorneys to create documents to protect that land under whatever circumstances. But I've been seeing these things on the internet about abandoned mansions, even these mansions that at one point were people's prized possessions. At some point they walked away from them. Or supercars in Dubai that people bought for $250,000, $500,000, and all of a sudden they abandoned them. They were done with them. Nothing is ours. we are borrowing everything while we're here. We're all renters. We like to think we're landlords and owners, but in 100 years, someone else will be living in our apartments. If our apartments are still there, they'll be living and working in the businesses we had. And the building that we have right now was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and there's a picture of it from the 1930s on the way down the stairs to remind me everybody who was a part of this building is gone. And I too will be gone someday. And that's the amazing thing, walking around New York City and seeing the amazing architecture and the beautiful buildings and thinking those were real humans who built those, who put them together, who thought about them, who secured the funding for it, who oversaw the construction, who did the electrical, who did the plumbing, who did the sheetrock, who did the ironwork. And they're all gone. And now someone else owns them. And then someday they'll pass it on to somebody else. And it may get passed down generation to generation. There may be generational wealth and the passing of land and property. But ultimately, we're only borrowing it for a moment in time. Our soul, I think, is one of the few things that really potentially could belong to us. But even that, I think we're borrowing. Because how could a 5-year-old pick up a golf club and swing like a professional? Raw though it may be, but a golf swing that looks pretty amazing. Where did they get that from? Or a 5-year-old who can kick a soccer ball. How? They might have been here before. Someone else might have had that soul, and that person who had that soul had become an expert in golf and passed that soul on to someone else. Regardless of what we do, I think we have to find a way to look to connect each other and bring the youth into the conversation. And I don't think voting at age 16 is outlandish. I think it is instilling in them the confidence that we have that they are the future leaders and that they should have a say in who runs their city and make sure they're safe, and the people who are running their city listen to them. It was always interesting to me that we could send people off to war at 18 and they could vote at 18. But maybe if we let them vote at 16, they would change the laws so they wouldn't have to go to war at 18. I don't think right now there's no draft. It's purely enlistment in this country. But some countries right now, there's forced military service, and there's also a draft where people are being conscripted to go to war. Because some nations do not know what to do with their young men of military age. And so they have to either create wars for them to fight in to dispense with them and give them something to do, or they have to, in a way, have a tacit agreement to allow them to leave the countries, to go to other countries, to make money, to send back and wire money to their country. But there's different ways of dealing with your military age men. But if you don't find jobs for them, homes for them, partners for them, futures for them, they will eventually turn on you. So it behooves us to find a way to help young folks become more invested in the future that they get to vote on. They get to have a say in. The copier in the office is going off right now. You may hear that in the background. Well, as I said, I don't want these things to go over 29.59, as I had to pause that for a second as someone came in to get something out of the copier. But as I said, I don't want these to go over 29.59. I think that's a good length. Spoonful. Could I talk for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Sure, probably. Because at the end of the day, I'm an improviser by trade, so I could just keep improvising and what thoughts came to my head. But at a certain point, my throat's getting sore. My thoughts are getting, kind of wishy-washy. And I want to keep it kind of fluid. And in order to do so, I want to keep it contained to a certain length. I love New York City. I love the people of New York City. I love the variety. And I really want this to be the greatest city in the world. But it has to happen intentionally. I hope New York City loves me, and I hope you've enjoyed this. I don't even know what episode this is, but go out there and walk with gratitude. Gratitude that we live in New York City, the capital of the world.